Family, grand rising, joyous rising, happy new day, happy Thursday, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. It depends on where you're checking in from. Check in, family, because you need to make this broadcast. I am so excited. This is long overdue, long overdue. I'm excited to introduce to some and present to others my great friend, Chris Marcus. Chris Marcus is the reason that I'm so inspired about silver. He really ignited a passion for silver in my soul. You all have heard the story about how my great grandfather actually had silver, but it never even dawned upon me how valuable it was until I started following Chris Marcus on his website, Arcadia Economics, and on his YouTube channel, Arcadia Economics. So I first met Chris actually vicariously through others, through the YouTube platform, and I listened to him. And then he created a symposium called the Silver Fest. And that's a festival or a conference where he brings together silver miners, silver enthusiasts, silver wholesalers, silver dealers, and some gold dealers too. But that's where I got to learn about him and really experience the joy that he has for what he does. I met him and his business partner, Yara. She's a beautiful woman, got a wonderful soul. She does yoga, which I love. So, I mean, we just clicked. So let me get off of that. I just love what he's doing. So he has a Silver Fest every summer, and that's where I really, really picked up this joy and enthusiasm for silver. Chris Marcus is actually an economist. Okay, so this man is brilliant. He's worked 11 years on Wall Street. So when he talks about silver and he talks about the markets, he knows what he's talking about. He received an MBA from the Wharton School, and that is the exact same school from which Donald Trump, my president, graduated with his economics degree. So he's an excellent company. This is a Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. He worked for 2 years at a bond rating agency. He worked for 7 years as an equity options trader. This man is brilliant. And this equity options trading company called Susquehanna International Group, which is a group that's on the American and New York Stock Exchange. Can you imagine all the work that this man has done, all the brilliance that's in his mind? And he did all this before he retired and left that industry in 2012 to create Arcadia Economics. There, his mission is actually to share what he would want his family members and his friends to know in the market and about silver and all these things that's going on before it happens. Talk about a man of value and purpose, a man that has integrity and dignity. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you all this man who has dedicated his entire life and career to helping us understand what's really going on in the markets. And he's the one who got somebody to admit from the CFTC what's going on behind the scenes, how they were spoofing the markets, all that. He got people to admit that JP Morgan, where they were doing some criminal activities and had to pay a penalty. This man is brilliant, and he's also an affiliate. He works or does some work for and with Andy Sheckman, our great friend, the CEO of Miles Franklin. So family, without any further ado, allow me to welcome my great friend, Chris Marcus.
Doc, thank you for the kind intro. I'm wondering who you're talking about there. Makes it sound all a bit more glamorous than, as I recall it. One correction, I unfortunately did not retire back in 2012. I suppose if silver had kept going higher when things were unraveling with QE and whatnot, maybe I had a chance back then. But yeah, I thought that what was happening was, I don't know, seemed more important than just slinging options on the trading floor. And really what got me into this was that I was on the trading floor back 2007, 2008, 2009, when things were unraveling with the housing bubble. Unfortunately, I did not see that in advance and thought that was odd because I'd come from business school, was on the trading floor, and thought I was the guy that was trained to see these types of things. And again, we remember Ben Bernanke and Hank Paulson saying subprime was contained and it was this perfect storm that no one could have seen. Yet, fortunately, back then, I remember one of the few good thoughts I had there was that, all right, well, if none of these guys saw it, but it turns out there were a group of people who saw these things in advance, some of whom had been warning about it for years, writing books about it. So I started studying a lot of that, noticed they were all talking about the issues that get created when you're expanding the currency base, or in other words, when the Fed is lowering interest rates. This was before we had quantitative easing in the US. So, but you add that on, and all the people who had seen it in advance were talking about gold and silver as the hedge against what the Fed was doing. So that really opened my eyes. And when I saw the response to a crisis caused by too much money printing and debt was to just pile it on even faster, that led me to spend the last couple of years on the trading floor, really studying gold and silver. It was an interesting setup because, it have, I guess, the post I was manning on the New York Stock Exchange at that point. It's kind of like a firehouse where you need someone who knows what to do when there's something happening, but you have a lot of free time. So I would go in there, get my stuff set up, and spend a lot of time reading about gold and silver, inflation, listening to interviews of some of the people that I've had on my show over the years that were at Silverfest, some of the same people that I think you're having on your show now as well. And certainly seemed to be a much different story than what the public was often told. And just in the same way that a lot of people were blindsided by the housing bubble. And I guess the mantra back then was that the housing can never go down. It's this perfect market that only goes up. We found out otherwise. And I've been of the school of thought that this is far from over. With that said, I guess back in 2011, 2012, I never would have imagined that would continue to drag on as long as it has, and that we'd see 24, or I guess down to 22, a little under $22 silver today, gold back up on the higher end. Yet you see that there are still a lot of these issues out there. I mean, the Fed is raising interest rates at a pretty wild clip right now, and not a surprise that we saw the stock market get clobbered, bond market get clobbered, real estate market get clobbered. And while there's a debate about whether we're going to have a hard landing, a soft landing, a no landing, or so forth, I think that people are largely in consensus that there are some issues out there. And, how is the Fed going to face this as things continue to deteriorate under the higher interest rates? Well, I'm of the school of thought, along with a lot of others, that they're going to do what they've always done, which is revert back to printing more money. We saw that in 2020, especially. We saw that in the time leading up to 2020. And there's this, or even ever since 2009 when it started, because we had that period between 2011 or so where the Fed was always talking a lot about tightening, removing all of the money that they've printed. And you saw gold and silver get clobbered because there was all this talk about tightening and removing the money. If you look at the Fed's balance sheet, they talked a lot about it, but most of that money's still in there. We had 0% interest rates for the better part of a decade. And it doesn't leave an ideal picture of where things are going from here. So unfortunate in one sense, but at least I find that if you understand some of the dynamics and what's happening, why it's happening, hopefully that can help make it a little easier for people to navigate. So appreciate what you're doing now that you have a wildly successful show on YouTube, and just nice to see how things have been coming along, and excited to talk about silver, and we can talk about gold and anything else today that you'd like.
Yeah, I have to say that you've been my confidant behind the scenes. So when I would get discouraged, you would prompt me on different things I could do to, boost my audience, different, just different techniques that I have incorporated. So thank you so much, because it has contributed to the success of the show. I appreciate you. Yeah.
Well, I think you're doing a great job with the show, which is what's driving the success of it. And I find that, I mean, shockingly enough, when you have a passion for something and you're enjoying what you're doing, then that's usually the biggest factor. So it's great to see your smile each time you start one of your shows, and
Yes.
glad that people are tuning in, because you have a lot to share and a lot that people can learn about on your show too.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Speaking of silver, I've noticed that countries have left the United States dollar and that they are returning to gold for trade in terms of gold for oil and other things. What is different? What do you see going on as it relates to silver? Like, what is piquing people's interest in silver in the silver market?
Well, the main thing that I would say is worth note. I mean, there's probably a bunch of things that we could dig into yet. We've seen a decline in the silver inventories.
Hmm.
And this is at a time where we've seen, I believe, the biggest deficit in history last year in the silver market was about 200 million ounces. And we're also seeing a big decline in what's called the registered inventory on the COMEX, which is the amount of silver that is available to be delivered. So you have some of these dynamics building that didn't exist back when I got into this. I was looking primarily at, they're going to keep printing money, and
Mhm.
if people turn to silver, which is what has happened historically, then you're going to have demand driving that. But now we actually have an imbalance where the inventories are getting low, and if things should continue in the same pattern as we saw last year, the couple of years before that, it's now to the point where it's becoming a little bit of a concern of where is the silver going to come from. On top of that, at the current silver price, which is now a little bit over the average silver miner cost of production, not much. And certainly for people who are investing in the silver stocks know that it was a tough year last year for just about any gold or silver stock. I mean, most of these got pounded, which has left things in a situation where it's not like people are running out to start a silver company today at the current price, which, I have a lot of silver miners on my show that one after another say that, if you want more silver, you're going to have a higher silver price. One caveat to that is that a lot of the silver actually comes from non-primary silver miners. What that means is that it comes as a byproduct from companies that are going out looking for copper or gold projects or lead or zinc. So it's not as if the silver price goes up that they're necessarily going to have a lot more. If they do, it may take somewhere from 10 to 20 years to get some of those projects online. But in regards to the companies that are specifically hunting for silver, it's not an ideal environment. If the Fed raises rates higher or longer and people sell more COMEX contracts and the price goes down to $20 or below $20, you're going to see even more of these projects turned off. Or even aside from projects turned off, you're not going to see people launching new projects. So you really have an interesting dynamic where at the same time that silver is being used more and more, the conditions that would lead to generating that supply of silver are becoming more difficult, let alone if you tack on this whole green movement where everybody wants to make everything carbon friendly. And I mean, it's calling for massive amounts of metals that remains a bit of a mystery where these things are going to come from. So, in relation to gold, obviously, as you've mentioned and you talk about on your show quite a bit, we're seeing a lot of countries around the world actively make plans to do trade outside of the dollar. Russia, obviously, a big one of them. They're doing a lot of deals with China, with the BRICS nations. Now we have China and Saudi Arabia starting to talk about relationships and trade arrangements that don't include the dollar. So it's really an interesting time that we've reached where these are some of the things that I think back when I got into this, which was 2009 when I first started looking at gold and silver, we had people talking about the problems the US keeps spending, and to cover it up, they print money. And you'd think at some point other countries wouldn't be too keen on that arrangement. Now we're actually seeing them do something about it. Obviously, what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine last year and was kicked out of the SWIFT system was a big spark to that, and I think has left a lot of countries in that position where they wonder, well, are we next? And aside from people's feelings of whether Russia was right or not in what they're doing in Ukraine. Just the dynamic that that has created, I think, has concerned a lot of countries. I think that has a lot to do with why you see the record central bank gold buying, and just the way that it's almost on a daily basis that countries are making arrangements so they can do their trade, keep living and doing what they want to do as a society without involving the dollar. And certainly we're in an environment where if you do see some sort of gold backing or move even further towards gold, wouldn't be surprising. Would be interesting to see what happens. I mean, if you have a big move in the gold price, you would think that silver would be following along with that to some degree. So it's certainly an interesting time in the world, and a lot happening. But especially seeing the declining inventories of silver, getting to the point where it's really starting to not add up going forward.
So yeah, you were talking about how people were hunting for silver because of, I guess for people are using silver for industrial products and also for what else? Technology. I thought it was interesting to that point to note that India imported a lot of silver, and I haven't figured that out why they would do that. Can you shed some light on why India is particularly? I know they've historically been interested in gold, but why silver?
Well, I think there's been historical interest, both silver and gold.
Okay.
As the gold price has gotten higher, I think that's made it more expensive.
Mhm.
They have some import duties that they impose on it. I mean, I guess, do I know exactly why everyone in India is buying more silver? I'm guessing to some degree, yet certainly with the lower price, it's been more affordable.
Mhm.
And like you point out, last year was 300 million ounces, 304 million ounces of silver that they imported. And keep in mind that there's only a billion ounces of
Mhm.
silver that comes to the market between recycling and the mine production each year. So last year they took 30% of the entire market.
Wow.
So
Wow.
obviously we don't know if they're going to do that again exactly this year. It looks like the January numbers were a little bit on the lower side, so not necessarily a continuation of that yet, but I would imagine there's a large degree to which they're looking at some of the currency issues, and that has something to do with it. Again, the cheapness relative to gold, I think, factors in there as well. But a stunningly large amount, and that I think is what has contributed partly to some of the drawdowns in the inventory, because that silver has to come from somewhere.
Mhm.
And again, if the silver market is also in a deficit at the same point, at the same time,
It's showing something.
then seems like a lot of that may have been what was being sourced from the stockpiles. So
Yes. Hmm.
there you go,
Yeah.
seeing their record silver imports. That it was a stunning amount last year that they
I
took.
see. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I like silver. Honestly, I don't know if this makes sense or not because it's inexpensive. But somebody is asking in the comment section, why are they hammering down the prices in silver when silver has so many industrial uses? And why would they suppress the prices?
Well, that's what you get with the COMEX futures market. It's not usually reflective of supply and demand because the stuff is traded in paper. And right now, and throughout the last year, Fed's raising interest rates. So with higher interest rates, that's the Wall Street mantra of, and I mean to some degree, making reducing demand theoretically in the economies. So you have a slowdown. So commodities, stocks, bonds. On one hand, it's intuitive that they would go lower. Yet, I guess there's some degree to which the lower price makes sense, but it does often seem devoid of the actual fundamentals, which do include that deficit. And you mentioned Bart Chilton earlier, and that was one of the
Mhm.
things that really stood out from that interview, where he talked about how the evidence that he looked at, where you'd often see, and one of the questions I asked him directly is that I've come to understand that silver's trading at $20.05. You know, is it a case where you start putting a little sell pressure, you nudge it lower, and then there's a lot of stops right around those big numbers like $20, and then you get some algorithms kicking in, and it's often the same banks buying the silver back $1.50 cheaper. And he confirmed that that's exactly what has happened a lot, and that's what you heard referred to as spoofing.
Yeah.
And last year, J.P. Morgan had a trial where a couple of their traders were convicted of spoofing. So there's the interview with Bart. And I mean, I think, especially having looked at this for a couple of years, do I think every time the silver price goes down that it's the nefarious black hand just coming and smashing it? I mean, I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think there are times where certainly you see just massive amounts of silver dumped on the of contracts dumped on the market, which I think falls in line with what we heard of spoofing, and that the price is driven lower artificially. There are other times that people look at the data out there that comes out and are selling. So I don't think it's a matter of every time we see the silver price going lower, it's the big boogeyman out there. Yet certainly it has always been odd to me looking at the amount of money that's been printed in the past decade, let alone the decades before that, and seeing silver is still struggling to get into the mid 20s like it is today. So, but that's the thing with the way all of these commodities are traded. And that was one of the other things that Bart Chilton mentioned, where he was saying, he called it conspiracy theory, the idea of, well, is there enough silver to go around? People called in all the contracts. He said, well, that's the way all of these commodities trade, that there's never enough to satisfy all of these claims. So it certainly leaves things in a very vulnerable position where if you have the next round of quantitative easing, or if you have some bank fall over, or some sort of spark, and you see even more of a rush to silver than we've seen so far, that you could really have an issue. And there are people who talk about, well, there are people who are proponents of the system mention that they think it's conspiracy theory that there's an Achilles heel in silver, because you're never going to have that because all the contracts get rolled over. Well, that sounds to me like the kind of thing that happens until one day it doesn't. In fact, there was a book I read about the what happened in 1980, and that was pretty much what they were saying then. And that was the case until it wasn't the case. And the Hunt brothers and others were demanding physical silver, and you had a problem which sparked silver up to $50, and they had to change the rules to make it so that you could only enter selling transactions. You couldn't initiate a new buying transaction. So along with that, as I know you're well familiar with, and a lot of your viewers, we had the silver squeeze back in 2021, just a little over 2 years ago now. And one of the things that came out was a report from the LBMA where they actually said they were, at one point, they were weeks away from running out of silver, which shows that, and that was at $30, shows that same dynamic, which is not to say it's going to happen tomorrow, or that you can pinpoint exactly when that unfolds, but you see the same thing happen again. And it was actually interesting. I was listening to an interview with Rick Rule, who used to be the head of Sprott Global, which also manages the Sprott PSLV Trust. And he was talking about that because he said when they were trying to source silver, they went to New York, took what was there. They went to Chicago, took what was there. Went to Ottawa, took what was there, until it got to the point where they were having a hard time sourcing silver. So it's not just once that we've seen this, and especially with gold on the higher end. I mean, if you have gold 1,800 and change today, whereas it's broken over $2,000 a couple of times, although at least for the people that are looking at some comparable previous levels, back in 2011, gold was up to 1,900 when silver hit $50. So, I mean, if gold crosses 2,000, 2,100, 2,200, which I think is very conceivable given the amount of money that's out there, let alone what could be coming, you would think at some point silver, which trades in tandem, I mean, it hasn't been going up as much as gold, relatively speaking. But when you see a bigger move in the gold price, it seems to me as if there's going to be a point where silver finally has a bit of a spark. And the fact that there's so little of it out there, I mean, gold you can still find, but so much of the silver is consumed. All of the gold is still out there, but you're talking about a small amount of silver. So perhaps put in more clear terms, when the mainstream tries, if, or I would say when, but let's to be conservative say if the mainstream tries to start buying physical silver or buying these trusts like SLV, and if they're actually adding the metal that they claim in there, you can quickly get to the point where the price will have to gap higher because there's just so little of it to go around. Put that in context, I mentioned earlier that the supply of silver each year is around 1 billion ounces. So $22 silver, that's 20 or $22 billion, which may be a nice amount to you or I, but to a large investment fund or a government, that's not a lot. And I think that's I don't know if I'm careful on something that we're looking forward to, or none of this is ideal in a sense to look forward to, especially if we're seeing banks failing or the type of thing that happened in 2007 or 2008, which I think leaves a lot of people in a tricky situation that get into silver, because it's not like you want to see the world get harder or more calamity, yet you also see Fed balance continuing to go up, debt loads continuing to go up, and how long that goes on for, I guess we'll see. I'm pretty confident that we'll see it in our lifetime, but at some point you would think that's coming to an end. And if people continue to turn to silver and gold like they have throughout history, then certainly would be an ideal time to be holding some of it as an insurance.
Could that be the reason why we see price misdirection, is that maybe at some point we will see silver be used again as money?
Um, I suppose I could see gold more easily being used as money. I could see silver being used as money. Will we do that? I guess it depends on how things break down. Certainly, with the concurrent demand from the industrial standpoint, you would think one way or another it's going to be needed. So whether we get to the point where we're on a wide global scale using silver as money, that's something I can see both cases being made for, that we do or don't. But I mean, I think there's certainly a degree to which it's not popular to talk about these things. I don't think there's a lot of attention that some of the establishment wants a lot of attention on some of these things, and well, I guess that remains an open question. I think there's a degree to which silver, when you look at the history and if things really unravel how we would rebuild, I think there's certainly a case to be made we would be better off, and we may be forced into doing that. I guess a lot of that also depends on how things like CBDCs and these other things get rolled out, and the degree to which people go along with some of the things that are being put in place. So I don't know that there's a set answer. A lot of this is undecided. Although between the monetary aspect and the supply and demand and the consumption that goes into so many industrial and technological applications, I think whatever we end up actually using as money, there's certainly a pretty strong case to be made that silver at $20 today, I would think would be going higher, and perhaps substantially higher at some point, not too far off.
Yeah, I agree. So we talked about the role that silver plays in terms of being used in industrial purposes and technology. possibly money, but I have noticed what you said that you don't see a lot of discussion about silver being used as money. I never even saw a lot of discussion about gold being used as money, although I kept saying that we're moving to a gold standard. But now you do see some discussion about gold being used, but not silver. What does the Constitution say, though, should be used as money?
Well, the Constitution has silver in there being used as money, and obviously we've had the gold backing at certain points as well. So, I mean, it seems like a lot of parts of the Constitution have gotten left out, ignored. They talk about it. Why bother following it? Within the Constitution, dollar defined as 371 grains of silver.
Mm.
So that was the way it was initially set up, and um, again, not followed these days. But certainly, we have a long history of silver, a long history of government intervention in silver, going back hundreds of years. And obviously, we had silver in the coinage until the mid 1960s, and obviously a big role throughout our history. And I think that's what leads so many people to still believe in silver and its role. I mean, it's not as if this hasn't happened before. This has been going on for a long time until we had the 60s. LBJ took the silver coinage out. Then 1971, we had Nixon take us off the gold standard. So we've kind of just been floating around freely since then, borrowing and printing money. And what it's worth, I mean, gold at $35 an ounce back in 1971, now up to 1,800 and change. And I'm not sure if this has changed. I'm pretty sure this would still be the case. If you look back from the start of the century in 2000, gold and silver have actually outperformed the stock markets, which I remember when I came across that a little while ago, was surprised to see that, especially on the silver side. So I get it that it's a little bit frustrating to watch when people see so much money being printed, and yet the silver price for the last couple of years has gone down. But interesting when you take a step back, and obviously there's other data points you could pick where that wouldn't be the case. But at least over the last 20, 23 years, interesting to see that if you just invested in one or the other, it's not perhaps as much of a landslide as many might expect.
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned that gold and silver outperform the stock market. So I wondered, I know people always say you're not a financial advisor, but I'm just interested in seeing what you think about this. Would it be a good idea for some people who are a little uncomfortable with the stock market to say, okay, maybe I'll roll over some of take some money out or roll over some of my fiat dollars into silver? Would that be a wise thing to do, or would that be advisable? I don't know another way to say it. What would you do? How would I put it that way?
Well, that's an interesting way of phrasing it. I'll give my quick disclaimer of not legal financial advice. What I did when I left Wall Street, everything that I had, I put into silver and gold, which
Mm.
I'm not saying that I would recommend that. And perhaps in hindsight, maybe I suppose before you mentioned what would I do, I was thinking, if to your initial question of would people be well served to put some portion in there, I
Yes.
think having some balance in these things in general is a good idea.
Okay.
I mean, if the Fed begins printing again, like I expect and like a lot of other people expect, there's a case to be made that you'll see a lot of inflation in the stock market as well. So there's some stocks, especially if people identify businesses that are positioned well going forward and can handle an inflationary environment, that will do well. And obviously, in the past decade, we saw stocks outperform silver. Um, but certainly, there's that situation where if you have a breakdown of these things and not just what we saw in 2008, but really a breakdown of the money system,
Mhm.
then yes, that certainly would be a situation where I would want to have some silver, and why I own silver and a small amount of gold.
Mhm.
I think in general, having some diversification and balance in these things, hindsight, I would say that definitely went overboard going all in on silver. I mean, if you if you hit the timing right, or you know exactly how something is going to unfold, obviously that makes it easier in hindsight. But I'm glad that I had the silver, and I think certainly it's an important component. In fact, there was actually a report out from, I believe, Oxford a couple months ago, where they did some modeling on if you had included silver in some percentage in your portfolio, that it smooths out volatility, and the average portfolio would have performed better with that silver allocation in there. So I don't think I would recommend people saying go sell all of your stocks and put everything into silver, but certainly if you have a stock market meltdown, or if you have some sort of technological situation where we hear warnings about a cyber attack, I think just at least having some silver that you have in your possession is just a great insurance policy, perhaps is a good way of phrasing it.
Yeah, I think that was very wise what you said, that you want to diversify your portfolio. Then that way you're protected, you're safe, you're not all in on one thing. That was very, very wise. So I appreciate you saying that. That leads me to my next question when it comes to gold and silver. I remember when I first started closely following the gold to silver ratio, it was like 80 or 85 to 1. And I thought that was strange once I started listening to you and listen to you, Big Swear, Andy Scheckman talk about gold to silver ratio. So what is something that's a little more normal for gold and silver in terms of ratios? You
Well, I
know?
just calculated we're about 82 or 83 to 1 as
Mhm.
we look at it today. Um, it's really fluctuated a lot over the past 100 years, ironically, since the Federal Reserve was conceived. It's around maybe 40 to 1, up to 80 to 1.
Mm.
Interesting, though, if you go back a little bit further, I remember downloading a silver report from Peter Schiff, and he had the history, and it was like a couple 100 years before there. It stayed right around that 12 or 15 to 1 ratio.
Wow.
So I certainly think it's quite a bit high at the current
Mm.
current point, and I know some people have been trading in
Mhm.
gold for silver and doing a swap. I certainly think that there's credence in doing that, and that
Mhm.
can make a lot of sense. Does that mean that the ratio can't go higher? Of course not, because we saw in, I believe it was March of 2020, when silver went down to $12 for a couple of days.
I remember that. I got some. Yeah.
Well, there you go. We should just be getting your trading advice, because you have the right timing on that. And ratio went up at one point. I think it got as high as over 120 to 1. Um, Yet when you look at the rate at which things are coming out of the ground and the rate at which things are being consumed, and I believe it's still the case that in terms of the investment grade bars of what's actually kind of like in my backdrop picture, in those
Yeah.
stacks there of the investment grade bars, that there's less above ground silver than gold at this point.
Mm.
So not what's inside the earth, but if you added up all of the industrial bars of silver and gold, that there's actually less above ground silver. So add
Mm.
in that most of the gold is still that's out in people's hands, or in coin form or jewelry form, is still there. And like we said, a lot of the silver getting consumed and used in small amounts, which don't make it easy to recover from a landfill, at least at the current price. Certainly a case to be made that you could see that ratio come down quite a bit.
Mhm.
How far, I suppose we'll see. I know Bix thinks we're going back to 1 to 1 or beyond that. And when you look at how it's being used and what's out there, I don't know if we'll get to 1 to 1, but certainly a good case to be made for it going a lot lower from here.
I had spoken to an economist once, I want to say like 3 years ago, and he had said at the end of empires, at the end of every empire, you actually saw the gold to silver ratio become 3 to 1. So 1 to 1 is a bit enthusiastic, but I'm here for it. I'm here. I'm here for it. Like taking the gold, trading it in for silver, and then
You're,
when
you're ready for $1,800 silver.
Yes.
Me too.
So, do you mind if we ask some questions, Chris? Oh, before we
Sure.
do that, though, I'd like for you to say any final words that you would like to say about what's going on in the silver market before we get to some questions.
Oh, just that it is an interesting story. I remember there were a couple of times over the past decade where I wondered whether it was time to move on and do something different in life, although it just seems so odd and fascinating at the same time. And I think it's good to be aware of and to be learning about because, like you mentioned, it's not something that's often discussed on CNBC or Wall Street Journal. Um, and I think there are considerable risks of something similar to 2008 or more severe based on what's happening with the central banks and the economy and various forces that are in play. So, um, by all means, that's not a call to go out, sell everything you have, and load it entirely into silver, but certainly a good thing to be learning about and just being aware of, and perhaps having some silver. I think there's the point where it will come in rather handy.
Yes, and it sounds like that you're making a case for silver actually not only being wealth. Andy Scheckman says silver and gold, precious metals are wealth, which I wholeheartedly agree upon. It also seems like silver and gold are a good hedge against inflation, and it's a way to save. That's the way I see it. It's a great savings uh, method. I know if I had liquid cash, Chris, I would be spending it on frivolous things. But when I roll it over into precious metals, then I'm thinking to myself, this is a savings and it's something that I can pass on to my posterity or my future generations.
Yeah, especially when you look at things from a longer term perspective. I mean, right now the Fed has done one of the fastest interest rate increase in history,
Mm,
and yet depending on even looking at the government numbers, if you're holding cash, it's still losing 6% or more per
mm,
year.
hate.
So that's a little bit of a problem, even if you're saying, all right, well, the interest rate on the government treasuries is higher, I'm going to go there. It's still not as high as the inflation rate. So
Mm,
there's a little bit of a problem out there. Um, and whether it's other commodities or other assets that hedge against inflation.
mhm,
Certainly, if I was going to save something to give someone 20 years from now, the current dynamics leave me feeling a lot more comfortable with the silver than just leaving dollars in an account, which, especially, I mean, this is just with what has been printed so far, let alone what's to come.
Chris, do they talk to you in economics and in your MBA program? Do they even talk about gold or silver or precious metals?
I don't remember hearing anything about gold or silver back during the MBA program. It's funny. I do remember there was a guy named Jeremy Siegel that people might be familiar with. He pops up on CNBC from time to time and is the head economic. I believe his class was economics. And I remember sitting there, and he was saying that when the economy's getting rocky, Fed comes in, prints money, buys some bonds. When things are soaring, they undo the money, sell some bonds, and that was just how it works. So, what did I know back then? I was just thinking, all right, I'm here, just pay attention, hopefully learn from the experts, and
Right.
yet none of that school of thought saw what happened in 2008.
Mm,
And whereas the people who were talking about gold and silver and the flaws of that model that the Fed uses were talking about it. And I suppose sometimes people are critical, saying, well, the silver bugs or the gold bugs were wrong. I don't know. I mean, I think at least on the gold side, I mean, it's up not far off the all-time highs yet. The idea that a lot of silver and gold bugs were also saying, hey, when they're telling you this inflation is going to be transitory, that's not going to be the case. And sure enough, you see that wasn't the case. Similar,
yes.
I was not inclusive in this back in 2006, 2007, but there were people back then saying, hey, you got some real problems. Subprime isn't going to be contained.
Mm.
So I would take what the Fed says with a grain of salt often. No,
Okay.
they don't talk about this much at business school. nobody
Okay.
else was talking about it on the trading floor. And um, I don't know. I get it. I mean, maybe it takes that a different mindset to look into some of these things where I get it. People want the Fed to be right, or they want the system to be stable and want things to keep going on. I think there are some problems that are going to prevent that from happening at some point and set
Mhm.
us up for a little bit of a day of reckoning. So, it's hard to think about some of these things on a day in, day out basis, yet I think they're still important nonetheless, and
Yeah.
glad that people are talking about it.
Right, because what I've heard you say, and I've also heard Andy Scheckman say this, is don't pay attention to what they say. Pay attention to what the money does. So big money is actually getting into silver and gold, or they've always had it. They accumulate it. As a matter of fact, Chris, I remember some guys in my community in Kentucky that they had a hard time finding a job. So they went into becoming movers. And I'm a nosy person. That's how I became a journalist, right? So I asked them, I said, what do those rich people, what do y'all work? And they said, oh, we just work for, some people that live on the East End. And the East End people have money. I said, what do rich people have? Do they have different cars? Do they have, what did their furniture look like? And they said, you know what was interesting? Rich people have gold and guns. And that blew my mind because you're talking about this was just like 10 years ago. I hadn't even I heard about gold, like silk gold jewelry, but I was thinking, why would they hoard gold? So it makes sense because now that I'm in this space, it's like, wow, follow what they do. They may not talk about it, but pay attention to what the money does.
Well, I mean, certainly if you built a big company and have 10 or $100 million sitting there and need some place to put it, I mean, you think certainly you want to invest some of that productively and into business, yet at least for that comparison between cash and metals on some level,
Mm,
when you think about it, it's like, wow, well, they keep adding these dollars. I mean, that's basically supply and demand.
right.
And I think it's not surprising that a lot of people turn to gold and learn about that and understand the value of it. And especially if there's some amount of money or savings or wealth that you just want to maintain, I think there's a good case that in terms of purchasing power, you'll do more than maintain that over the long
That's right.
term. But I think that's why a lot of people do look at it that way.
Yeah, because would you say that silver and gold actually does it increase in value over time, or at least maintain its value? Which is it best to say?
Well, I mean, you can look at some of those charts of oil priced in gold, and often they stay pretty constant and steady. Um,
Mm,
I don't think
okay.
that the current gold and silver prices have caught up by any means to the amount of money that's out there. So
Mm,
I would think, especially one of the things that I've thought about is that at some point, I would expect that you would see gold and silver going up in value and real estate coming down. So the
mm,
idea of buying a house for a lot fewer ounces of gold and silver seems very plausible to me. Um,
yeah.
but there's traditionally, some level of stability, which things are supposed to maintain their value in gold and silver terms versus what you see in the dollar, where it just loses its value.
And to your point, I've heard that as the dollar declines in value, precious metals increase in value. And I don't know if there's a price in terms of increase, but maybe the value that people place it is, increased. But that's what I've heard.
Well, perhaps a different way, not better or worse, but a different way of looking at it is that, ounce of silver is going to be an ounce of silver tomorrow. 10 years from now, it was an ounce of silver if it existed 10 years ago. But
Wow.
it's the dollar, the number of dollars, that's what is changing.
I see.
That's why we've seen gold around $250 at the turn of the century up to 1900, which is a reflection of how many more dollars have been entered into the system. So um, Yes, I get it. We're trained, because when we go to the store, you buy lunch or dinner, you're normally paying in dollars. So we think of gold and silver going up, yet perhaps a more accurate way to think of it is that the number of dollar or the value of the dollar is being decreased through the debasement.
Mhm. Yes. One of the questions somebody asked is how much is an ounce of silver right now? I think I heard you say it's less than $22. So I'm just gonna
Well, it was up at $22, right over 21.90, even as recently as yesterday. Although
okay.
there were some Fed minutes that came out yesterday suggesting you might have rates higher for longer. So today's silver looks like it's trading right around $21.30, which
Okay.
again,
Okay.
not that far over the cost of production for the primary silver miners. So
Mm.
a little bit on the lower end there, John.
Do you have a projection of how far silver might go up in the next few years?
Oh, geez. Well, by 2030, I suppose I could see a scenario in which silver is $200 an ounce by then.
Ooh,
I wonder
wow.
what our slice of pizza or probably the cost of a lot of things have skyrocketed by then. If you do have an environment where we have an overt shortage of silver, similar to what we talked about, how kind of happened in 1980, was a degree to which that almost happened a couple of years ago. That's an environment in which I think you could see $200 silver. Um, it's a hard thing to forecast. I mean,
Mhm.
if the silver supply stays intact and
Mhm.
we're still looking at things and the Fed's just tinkering around interest rates and you haven't had something more like 2008 occur by then I would imagine silver will fluctuate around in the 20s, maybe cross over to the 30s. But I think
Mhm.
when you have some sort of breakage, that's the point at which, or a shortage or an inability to deliver silver that is owed, that's
Mhm.
when you have an environment where you could see some bigger numbers.
Yeah. So if there's a problem with the supply, uh, I don't know what will happen. I don't even know if we can answer that question. The demand is high. We've had supply chain issues since the shutdown. What's going to happen when the demand continues to increase? The price probably will increase, right? Yes. Okay. I don't know what else could possibly happen. I guess they'll
Well, I
have to.
mean, look at what happened in nickel last year, where the contracts went from 30,000 up to 100,000 in a
Mm,
relatively short period of time. So,
mm,
if you had something similar to what happened in nickel occur in silver, that would, conceivably take silver up to $100.
wow.
Obviously, they came in and canceled a lot of the trades, and the price went back down. So it's not a straightforward thing. But certainly, if you get to a point where, for companies that are manufacturing electronics and other products, where there's a shortage and they have to outbid each other,
Mm,
that's certainly one of the things that silver investors, in some ways, look towards. Again, there's a lot of different scenarios in which you could have something like that happen, whether it's a banking issue or a shortage industrially. But
yeah,
when you have those supply and demand fundamentals, it is interesting to think about what could happen, because
absolutely.
you have the fundamentals in place that there could be a gap higher.
Absolutely. Somebody said they'd rather have physical than digital. I don't know if there's a such thing as digital silver, but do you
Yeah,
know?
there is digital silver. There's a couple
Okay.
projects out there. There's
Mhm.
Kinesis, there's Load, there's a few others. Goldmoney.com. They have
Mhm.
essentially it's almost serves as a silver bank account, and you can get a debit card
Mhm.
and you buy $10,000 of silver and it's stored in their account. You could use your debit card, you could transfer money. Um, I know a lot of people are critical of digital silver, and I think certainly it's something you want to be extremely careful of. I also see why there is some validity to the concept because we live in a digital world. So let's say
Right.
that you want to buy something on Amazon, or you hire someone to do work for you on a contractor somewhere, and they live in China or India. Are you going to be sticking a couple silver coins in the mail? Are you going to be trying to chop it up so you get 0.362 ounces exactly? So, I mean,
Mhm.
it's in the same way that Visa or MasterCard, they serve a role.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think that we'll continue to see things out there like that. By all means, if you're going to get into any of those, a lot of due diligence, I would say, is required because you want to make sure things are being done properly. I understand what Tooth is saying, that some people just want physical silver, and I understand that. Um, but I mean, it just in terms of the way the world is set up that we currently live
Mhm.
in today, I get it. The, the reason that some people do like the digital, and again, by all means, always good for people to do what they personally feel comfortable in, and not that there's one solution for everyone.
Absolutely, because even in the world, like you said, the world in which we live now, we don't just use physical greenback. We have digital ways of using the so-called money. And you might pay a price for it, the convenience price, but we do have that incorporated in the system. So I could see that carrying over into whatever we decide to do in the future. Absolutely.
Yeah, and one other note there, where I know there's that saying, if you don't hold it, you don't own it, and I
Yes.
get what people are getting at, and I think there's a lot of credence to that. On the other hand, let's say that you have $10 million of silver and gold.
Mm.
You want to store that all in one
Mm.
place? I'm not sure
Right.
that I would feel comfortable doing that. So, again, another area where some diversification could be well served,
Yeah.
because I mean, there's some degree to which living on planet Earth, you some trust of other people is required, unless
Hmm.
if,
Hmm.
if you go completely off grid and you have your farm and you're kind of like Bill Holter has. I mean, he might be one of the few people that if the whole thing shuts down, there's a lot of people that are prepared for that. And by all means, I think that's great for the people who are able to do that. Also, at the same time, if are having a large amount of gold and silver, I think that there
Yeah.
is a good case to be made for diversification, and that there are storage options that are trustworthy.
Hmm.
If someone comes to your home with bad intent, there's risk there
Hmm.
too. So I don't know that there's a complete one perfect solution. Again, going to be different for everyone, but just a few things to think about.
Absolutely. I agree with you because, with inflation being high, prices being high, you don't know what people are going through, what's going on in their minds. They might know that you have silver or suspected silver or gold, and it might not be safe for you to have it all in terms of being physical. So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Although it,
So,
it is ironic, at least when you think about, certainly if we have silver shooting higher, gold shooting higher,
mhm,
and becomes a bit of a more mainstream topic, I think especially what you just mentioned there is quite valid.
mhm,
Although right now it's like, I wonder, with the way most of the world views the precious metals, it's like if you left something there, would people even know that it is silver and gold? What to do with it? I mean, there's those Mark Dice videos where he stands outside on the street in San Diego and offers people an ounce of silver or a Snickers bar, and he can't give the silver away. And it was funny, I saw in some of the recent ones, he actually amped things up because he would film the video in front of a coin shop,
mm.
because at first people, they didn't know what to do with. They're like, oh, I'll take the Snickers. I don't know, what am I going to do with the silver. Then he would do it in front of a coin shop. He's like, well, you could actually take it right over there and you could sell it. They'll give you like, 20 or $20 for it.
Yeah.
And still, it's just so foreign to a lot of people that um, it's just interesting to think about that. But yes, like you were saying, though, if you have a large amount, and especially if people know that you have a large amount in your
Mhm.
house, just something you want to factor in.
Yeah. Speaking of giving silver away, I have to say that I received a free ounce of silver from you when I participated in Silverfest. And when I held that shiny coin in my hand, Chris, oh my God, you talk about raising vibrations. I could feel like this something like my frequencies raised, something about looking at it being shiny and touching the surface of it. It just does something to you. So I want to tell you, thank you so much for giving me that experience. I think I shared that with you. I hope I did. That it really inspired me to want to get into the silver market. So thank you so much.
Did you get one of the Silverfest cubes that we had made for Silverfest too?
No, no, I got a coin. I didn't get the Silverfest cube. No.
Okay, well,
Wow.
we'll have to get you one of those. I still actually, because I've been down here in Mexico, and
Okay.
we have a couple of them up in the U.S. So I still haven't actually seen mine, although fortunately most or everybody else who won received their Silverfest cube. So that's one of the nice things. And maybe one day we'll have the Dr. Kia Pruitt ounce. So
Oh yeah, that would be so
you got to get
awesome.
your own silver product design there.
That would be awesome. Yes, I would love that. Speaking of Silverfest, Chris, can you give us any information about what the Silverfest is and when the next one, what when the next one will be held and where it would be held?
Well, we've done Silverfest 3 times so far. Each year it's been online.
Okay.
I have not even started thinking about Silverfest this year. I mean, we've done it in October, November, so still a ways off. But
Mhm.
certainly, I will check back in with you as we get a little closer there and figure out what we're doing. But was fun just to have a day where we would bring in a lot of different voices in the silver community. And
Yes.
it's one of those things where I tried to learn as much as I can about silver, yet there's so much history and behind it, and really like a nice team sport. So great to get. Everyone has their different angle that they look at it. Some people are looking at the monetary value, some are looking at the
Mm.
supply and demand, some are looking at the mining stocks, some are looking at the charts. And
Yes.
um, glad you had fun at that first
Oh, yes.
Silverfest in particular.
It was
And
fun.
um,
I've
so
attended all of them. Each one, I've learned so much. I got to meet Chris Newmeyer. He actually sent me not a free ounce of silver like you did, but he allowed me to get discounts.
yeah.
At the see First Majestic, I think.
Yep, that's Keith Newmeyer, First Majestic, and
Yeah.
they're one of the larger primary silver mining companies now, pulling some gold out of the ground as well. But
Mm,
um, Keith has certainly been one of the leading voices in speaking up
mm.
about some of the shenanigans that go on in the COMEX over the years. So um, glad you got some discounted silver there.
I did. So for all you that don't know, Silverfest, when you attend, is online. It's amazing. And I don't know how Chris does this, how he brings all these people from all over the country to these are experts. You're talking about David Morgan, Keith Newmeyer, Andy Scheckman, the big names, people who are experts. They've written books, they've been in the field for decades. He puts this together and doesn't even charge. This man is brilliant. He's compassionate. He cares about we, the people, and he really executes and lives his mission to tell us what he would want his family and family members and friends to know. So when you attend the fest, you can go to different booths and learn and acquire information from these different experts while you still have a chat like we have right here, and you're chatting with some amazing people, Chris, that I've met on your platform at the Silverfest and actually formed some very good strong relationships
I
with.
mean, we'll have to have you there as the speaker this year, teaching the rest of us now that you're becoming an expert. So.
Thank you. Thank you. So somebody wants to know, how can they get a Silverfest cube?
Well, unfortunately, it's a little late on these Silverfest cubes. That was from Silverfest 2 in 2021, but maybe when I finally get, I think we still had a couple cubes left over for ourselves. Maybe I'll try and get you one,
Mhm.
Kia, and maybe I'll if we have enough, I can get you one or two extras, and you can pick a winner or two from your audience and I'll have to get back to the U.S. first before I
Okay.
can give you a confirmation on that. There
Okay.
are still a few of them out there, though.
So, Chris, now if people were interested in getting into gold and silver, now people do know I'm an affiliate, but we're here today to patronize you and your business, your company. Somebody say, Chris, I really enjoy what you said about silver. I'm excited about the Silver Fest. Now I want to get some silver. How can they contact you to get silver?
They can go through the website. I mean, if we do also do affiliate sales for Miles Franklin.
Mhm.
Again, none of this was to what we're talking about here today was to
Yeah, of
sell anyone on silver. This is
course.
just what I do and what I've been spending the past decade or so trying to figure out in this complex financial world. Although, if someone is interested in buying or selling silver or gold or any of the metals, they can email us at arcadia at milesfranklin.com,
Oh,
and
okay. Let me write that
we'll
down.
get them in touch with broker at Miles Franklin.
Arcadia at what is it? Miles Franklin.
Arcadia at milesfranklin.com.
Did I spell? See if I spelled that, or I'm gonna put it up here. Um, oh, there you go. Arcadia. Is that the way you spell Arcadia?
That's it.
Okay. And finally, Chris, where can people find you?
Well, primarily on YouTube, we have our channel Arcadia Economics, and you also had the website address, which is arcadiaeconomics.com. And again, just talking about silver and the different developments that come out each day and trying to make some sense out of some of the wild things that are happening in the world and just having conversations, getting different perspectives. I look at myself as a student of the silver world and
Yeah.
just trying to understand how all these things fit together and see where it might be headed. And if that's helpful to people, there's our YouTube page. And again, arcadiaeconomics.com, spelled the same way, is where you can find us on the web.
Okay. What about? Are you on Twitter? Are you on social media as well? Other social media outlets?
I am
Platforms?
on Twitter, and I believe I am Arcadia Economic without the S, since that didn't fit. Yes, I am Arcadia Economic, no S on Twitter, and
Okay.
you can find us there if you have any questions. I try to keep up with the messages that come in and get back to anyone who has questions or that can help with any information.
And so excellent. So you're on Twitter at Arcadia Economic, not with the S. Also, we have your website up here, and if people put their information here on it's on my right. You will send them a newsletter. Yes.
Yep, we send out it's usually one message per day, usually with the that day's episode, so you can see what it's about. If you want to tune in and watch, you can have the link right there, and so not a lot of spamming anyone's email account. But if you like thinking about silver, hearing some experts talk about silver, and figure out what's going on in the market, that's where you can sign up to be notified of that.
And I'm looking for awesome. I'm also yes, this is what I wanted to see. Can you see the store on the screen? Let me see.
I can.
Yes, this is the store. I love it. So, family members, if you're interested in any of Chris's products, this I love the shirt says "Got Silver." So he has the t-shirts, he has the pullover hoodies, Drain the Comex. What's this here, Chris? Drain the Comex. Here is that I
That
don't know,
looks like
a
a
sticker.
sticker. I haven't
Oh,
gotten one of those. I did have my Got Silver mug, which I think I've lost somewhere in Mexico. But
oh.
well, it seems like there's a few new things that have been added that I haven't even seen there. I'd like to get the Got Silver pillow one of these days, though.
Yes, I like that. This is what I want. I think I'm gonna order these today. I want the Got Silver yoga pants or
I've heard those
leggings.
have been popular, and oh, maybe I'll get an iPhone case too. So that could.
Yeah, he's got an iPhone case.
Oh, and
Oh,
now the pillow comes in different colors too.
I
So
see. Look, you're doing it. You're
I
getting so
haven't
good.
logged into that for a while, so nice to see everything that's there.
It looks beautiful. So I've been so honored to have you here, Chris. You're an amazing person. You're well educated. You have a lot of experience. You're a compassionate, loving, humanitarian, philanthropic human being. It's just such an honor to know you and call you my friend. Thank you for the encouragement. the inspiring, how do you say it? How you've inspired me. Thank you for the education. Thank you for the networking and just being an overall great friend. I really appreciate you. And thank you finally also for coming on our show today to share your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm
You're
really
welcome.
excited to see how well things are going with your show and that now
Yeah.
you're doing the same thing. And congratulations for all that you're doing.
Thank
And I think
you.
the people in your audience are lucky to have you and
Thank you.
like tuning into the show as well. And just appreciate what you're doing and do this again sometime.
Yes. So for all of you who don't know, Chris actually inspired me to get in the precious metals market. And when I just had a very small audience, he gave me certain type of techniques and tools, just things, encouragement, things that I could do. He also inspired me to become an affiliate with Miles Franklin because I told him I was interested in precious metals. Chris is one of the people that have supported me and allowed me. I'm stepping on his shoulders. He has allowed me and afforded me the opportunity to be who I am and where I am today. So I give honor to him. I give honor to his business partner, Yara. I love doing the yoga with her at the Silver Fest. I give honor to Miles Franklin, the company, and Andy Sheckman, the CEO of Miles Franklin. These are phenomenal people that took time out of their busy schedule running multi-billion-dollar companies, million-dollar companies to come on and share their information with us. So family, please, please support Chris Marcus at his website, arcadiaeconomics.com. Support his YouTube at Arcadia Economics and support his store and his business being an affiliate with Miles Franklin. So I love you. Any final words, Chris, before I get out of here?
No, just thank you. And thanks to everyone who was watching today. Hope you found this helpful and
Yes.
just hope people are doing well out there and finding the positive, beautiful things in life. And appreciate being here with everyone today.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, family and friends, I'm sure we've said something to inspire you and raise your vibrations to encourage you and inspire you to create the most amazing, magnificent life that you desire and deserve. That's it for today. We love you and we hope that you're continually to create the reality that you desire. Peace, family. Stay well. Bye for now. Bye, Chris. Take care. You are amazing.
Thank you. Bye,
You're
everyone.
welcome. Bye bye.